we go. Good. Okay. Now I'll go back to the presentation. So for those of you, if you've never used Poll Everywhere before, it's a interactive online polling activity where you can get immediate feedback. That's a great way to build engagement during your presentations or meetings. What I chose to do, since I wasn't sure how many of us have smartphones or are watching from either a smartphone or a laptop versus maybe you have a cell phone. So you can respond in one of two ways. If you're watching this presentation on your smartphone and laptop, you can then either, well, from the laptop, you would escape out of the WebEx view. You're still live and in the meeting. It does not shut that down. But by escaping, it minimizes the WebEx window. So then you can open a new tab in your browser. And if you choose this option and you do that, then in that new tab, you just want to type the address pollev.com/Phoenix704. That's our section number. Or if you prefer, and which I find easier myself, is I'm watching from a laptop, but I also have my handy smartphone and cell phone. So in the messages, the simple SMS type message application, to participate in this poll, open up your messages, and then to the number 22333, I think there's supposed to be a third 3. It should be 22333. And what you want to type in the text box is the word Phoenix 704. So if you want to do that now, what that does, it opens up and puts you into this particular Poll Everywhere activity. And then, as we go through each question, you will then just simply in the text message box, just type your answer, whether it's A, B, C, D, or E. And it's still being sent to that code, 22333. Now, as a reminder, I made every slide repeat that information. So you'll see that at the top of the slide. You ready to give it a go? First question. Okay, so here's it's starting the session. So now the session is live. So this is where if you type Phoenix 704 to the number, yes, I'm right, 22333, it will open the session and you can participate. Okay. So the first question, and as you can see at the top, it's got the same instructions. So if you forget, the first question I have today is, so how are you feeling today? I thought that'd be a good, simple lead-in. And so I just gave a range of emotions. Perhaps you're feeling rather happy. You would just enter in A and then press the up arrow or go or enter button. If you're so-so, give that a letter B. If you're feeling somewhat stressed, choose option C. Just type the letter C in. If you're feeling tired, many of us are exhausted with COVID, got work from home, raising a family, trying to get work done, and all the other chores. Perhaps you're just exhausted. Press the letter D. And let's be honest, what would you rather be doing? Well, my wife's a baseball fanatic, so she'd obviously be rather watching a baseball game. Tonight is the kickoff of the NFL season. I personally would be watching the football game right now. Or maybe just wish to spend more quality time with your family or significant other. So press your choice, A, B, C, D, E, or G. And we can see how the response is built. So here are the responses that are coming in. So a large majority of us are feeling rather happy at the moment. Good to hear that. Some of us are, so-so. No one so far has said they'd rather be watching the football game. Well, I've got to participate in this question. Let's see. So first I got to go and open the session. So let's see, to the number 22333, I'm going to type in Phoenix 704. now in the activity, and now I'm going to respond. The first letter would be F. Get that, and we should see there you are. So 9%. One of us, at least one of us, would rather be watching a football game. Thank you. All right, so here we got some added responses. 64% happy. I'm great. I'm thrilled to hear that. All right, next question. As you hopefully are aware, we are shutting down our ASQPhoenix.org website. It is ASQ headquarters intention that all member units, all sections, divisions, forums, special interest groups, we all migrate to their new MyASQ social networking site. And we have a site that's been active since April of 2019. So my question is, have you logged into MyASQ and created your profile yet? Remember, we're shutting down our normal website November 1. So back this month, you may not see any new content on ASQPhoenix.org. And sometime during the month of October, we will actually have an auto direct. So if you do forget and you type in ASQPhoenix.org, you will automatically be redirected to our MyASQ community site. And so you would answer A if yes and B not yet. And let's see where we're at. Great to hear. So at least a significant majority of the people on the call tonight have logged in and created a profile. Now the whole intention of the MyASQ is to improve member collaboration. It truly is meant to be a collaboration site, because for those of you who have logged on, you will note that it's based on your ASQ membership profile. So if you're a member of multiple divisions, you will see that in that right navigation panel, you have access to all of those division community sites. Just with a click of a button, and you can see what's happening in your various divisions that you're a member of. And same if you're a member of multiple sections. Most people are a member of the one section, but you can join other sections as well. And of course, the home page, the landing page, is all about ASQ headquarters. Now, as a networking site, what ASQ is trying to encourage members to do is to post discussion topics. So from that perspective, it's kind of a LinkedIn equivalent, where if you have a question or you'd like just to participate in some dialogue, you can post a discussion topic. You can post it either at the landing page level, that would be ASQ-wide, or you can join or log in, connect over to the Phoenix site. You're in our section community site, and you can post a discussion topic there. So there's two different levels. And the same thing if you want to either upload or download files. There's a tab that says files. And we encourage all of our members, if you have a spreadsheet or a template that you built or you find particularly useful, feel free to upload it and share it with others in our community, mindful of any copyright protections, however. And the same thing for any photos, videos. We're really trying to encourage networking. If there is a comment, if there is a discussion out there that you'd like to add some comments, please feel free to click on the reply button and offer your insights. That's all about building collaboration and networking. All right, next question. Okay, so once we are again allowed to meet face-to-face, hopefully sometime by middle of next year, I think is the current timeline, we plan to hold the monthly meetings like we did in 2019 and the first quarter of 2020. They will be face-to-face, but we will also have the WebEx live stream or WebEx webinar type meeting. So for those of you who are located close and it's convenient for you and you like and enjoy the networking opportunity, perhaps in person is your preferred. But if you maybe live more remote, maybe you got to deal with that rush hour traffic, or you live in the farther reaches of the fine state of Arizona, or it may just depend on the current situation at the time. So we do plan to have both again, so let's just see how responses are coming in for that. Wow, looks like a great majority of people would like to just as soon continue the virtual. And this is a very important question because we the leaders of your section, have to put together our 2021 budget by the end of this month. Used to be the end of November, and then ASQ kind of slipped a quick one on us, and they accelerated everything 2 months. So last month we just heard for the first time that, oh, by the way, we want to hear from all of our sections and divisions what your business plan and what your budget is for next year. This is what we, the member units, could grade it on. ASQ has like an award, a recognition award for those member units that are well managed, can deliver on the majority of their business plans, have good member satisfaction scores, that type of thing. So it's important for us to develop this business plan. What do we hope and plan to deliver? And then we're evaluated against that at the end of the year. So this is very necessary information for us as we go into that planning session in a couple of weeks here. Because, well, we intend to have a monthly meeting every month like we have. Now, maybe some months we may choose, maybe in the summer months, for example, maybe we will only do it virtually. But for the majority of the year, we'll continue to have both. So this is very handy and useful information. Thank you very much. All right, another question. November is World Quality Month. So does your organization plan to celebrate quality in any mean or capacity in the month of November? This used to be a really big deal. I mean, I've been in quality, well, I retired already 5 years, but I was in quality within a large multinational company for 35 years, and we had a very active World Quality Month celebration. Back then, it was in October. Now the world has coalesced and agreed to celebrate it in November, and it's been that way now for maybe 8 years or so. So this November is World Quality Month, and we're just asking, are you aware of anything that your employer might be doing to help celebrate quality? And if not, ASQ is planning some activities that you could perhaps bring to your supervisor or manager, or if you are at that position, something that you could bring to your organization, just to give a little bit of recognition of quality in the month of November. So let's see how those scores are trending. So as I suspected, many of us probably don't know. We don't know what's being planned yet. And some organizations may have already made the decision they don't have anything planned, or they don't have anything planned yet. So for those of you that would like to learn more, I just want to point out that ASQ has informed the section and division leaders that they are indeed rolling some tools out that the members can use and bring back to their organization. For fun to do type activities like Quality Jeopardy or other types of games that reinforce quality. Others are more serious in nature, but they are things that you can use back in your organization. I know ASQ always has special customized logos and table temps and banners and posters and those types of things that you can download and bring to your employer or place of business as well. So I know it's a couple months early yet, so information might not have rolled out, but it is coming up. We just wanted to give a heads up to that. So, all right. Next question. So the next 3 questions are all very similar. As you know, because of COVID, all the conferences that have been planned for the next 6 months or so are still going to be what they are calling a hybrid virtual. They will be scaled down significantly, but they still plan to have some portion of it face-to-face. And that would be primarily geared to people who live in that that community or that area. But a majority of these conferences will be offering virtual sessions. One of the opportunities that ASQ is offering all of the sections is if your members are interested, we ASQ will work with us, the section, to put together some watch parties. So rather than you pay an individual fee to go and listen to keynotes like they did for this past WCQI, you could instead choose to participate in a section Zoom or WebEx meeting. We will have paid the fee, you just join in. And you will still get RUs. We're still getting information about how this will work from ASQ. But this is something that they would like us to approach you with the opportunity just to see how much interest is out there. So it looks like we have 10 results so far. So this one is specific to the Quality 4.0 Summit, which is coming up the end of this month. And let's see how we're building. So looks like at least half of you would be definitely interested, and another 30% maybe, again, depending on all the other details. Now, what the cost, if any, to you might be. Again, the latest word I have is we, the section, would incur the cost. But we'll see how, we haven't received anything in writing, so we'll see how that works. But just, it sounds like an interesting opportunity. And so this is for the Quality 4.0 Summit. Okay. I will let, and these, if you are just joining in, you can still participate and it will add to the cumulative total. All right. The next question is very similar. It is about the upcoming Lean Six Sigma conference. This is always held right here in our backyard in Phoenix at the Point Hilton. And it's been that way, I don't know, maybe a dozen years or so. When this conference first launched, the first few years, it rotated between Orlando, Phoenix, and Seattle. But after 3 or 4 years, we decided to settle in on one location. And ever since then, it's been here in Phoenix. So it's in our backyard. So for those of you who it may be convenient to attend live in person, they will have it set up such that we will all be socially distanced. And of course, they will allow fewer people in per session. But even here, we would have the opportunity to participate virtually as well. So same question. If we were to offer a watch party for the Lean Six Sigma conference, would you be interested in participating in that opportunity? And let's see how it's building. So very similar numbers. We had like 50 and 30, and now it's 50-50. So great to hear. Maybe almost 100% of us would at least consider the opportunity. So that's very encouraging, especially for the section, since the Quality 4.0 Summit is right around the corner, and we really still don't have any details or specifics of how this is going to work. So it'll be a challenge, let's say, to pull everything together for that. But between now and February, we should certainly have some very detailed specifics for the Lean Six Sigma conference. So thank you very much. It sounds very encouraging. Sounds like this is a very positive way to attend the conference. And another question then is very similar, but about the upcoming World Quality Conference next May. So the 2021, this is May, so, we're all thinking, well, hopefully, we'll have a vaccine, or COVID-19 will somehow maybe die out or be less of a significant factor such that we can have a live event. But ASQ headquarters has already made the decision, because there's a lot of logistics that's got to happen, that the 2021 will still be a hybrid virtual, just as the 2020 was. So if you participated in that, you already have a good idea of how this works. So the keynotes will be broadcast live think most of them were live. A few were recorded. And then the sessions, depending upon who the presenter was, if they had time to record a presentation or they do it live, but they're all broadcast. Same thing here. Would you be interested in participating in a watch party of the WCQI keynotes and sessions sponsored by the local section? So see how that's building up. So again, virtually 100% would at least consider it, maybe a few less definites, but very encouraging. Thank you very much. So we will certainly take this information back to the executive committee, and we will discuss this further and work with ASQ to get these watch parties set up and then blast that information out to all of you. So thank you. Okay, I think I have one final question, then we'll get to my introductions and announcements, and then to Tim and Terry, who are our guest speakers tonight. Oh, I thought I had one more question. Where'd it go? Ah, well, I did, but it's not here. Oh, I apologize for that. Oh, no, I already moved it up early. That's right. My apologies. We did already answer that question. It was about the My ASQ site. We do have one more question at the very end of this, so before you sign off, we have one more Poll Everywhere question at the very end. So thank you, everybody. All right, so moving into the next phase, just some WebEx notes. I know we've all participated on multiple webinars by now, whether it's WebEx or GoTo or Zoom or whatever platform. Just remember that you are all muted upon entry. If you do have a question, you can unmute yourself. The meeting, well, it's in here. I've chosen not to lock it the last several meetings because a number of our members choose to join us right around when they think the guest speaker will be presenting. Now, I don't know what that means about my presentation, but I'll try to keep it to a minimum. So I'm not locking our meetings, but it is being recorded so that anybody who was not able to attend, you can always send us an email. We will send you the link. You then click on the link. It takes you to the WebEx account, and you can watch recorded meetings, and you get RUs assigned. So that's all a real slick feature that's built into the new WebEx tool that we didn't have with the other platform we were using, free conference call. All right, again, there is a handout that's already available up on our website. If you haven't yet had a chance to go out, you can do that now. And if you do have any questions, you can either unmute yourself, you can go into the participant panel, click on your name and raise the hand, or just click on the icon for the chat pane, and you can send a chat to the host or presenter that way too. Finally, if you want to receive RUs and you did not register giving us your name and email address, we need that because without an email, we can't send you the electronic RU. Or if you participated in a previous meeting, but for some reason you don't recall receiving the RU, you can go ahead and send an email to our Voice of Customer Chair, John Lindland. You have his address here. And we'll look up in the files just to verify that we have it on record that yes, indeed, you did attend, and he will shoot you out the RU. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for participating in that unique networking. I hope you had fun. It was a little different and kept your attention. Just thought I'd ask if there's anybody out there that had are here for the first time and you'd like to self-declare. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know if it's your first meeting and where you're from. I don't hear from anybody. Maybe people are having difficulty unmuting themselves. I can unmute everybody, but if there's a lot of background noise, I'll mute again. So let's try this. All right, everybody should be unmuted. Is anybody here for the first time? Nobody? Okay. Anybody here looking for employment?
Jim Dent. I'm here for the first time in this chapter.
Great. And are you from the Phoenix area or?
Yes, I am. I work out near Mesa. I work for Falcon Engineering Corporation, the DOT
Great.
contractor, so I'm interested in this presentation.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you here. Thank you very much. Hopefully you'll find this of benefit and choose to continue. Anybody here have any employment to offer? Anyone aware whether their employer has some openings in quality, project management, change management, some related field? No? Okay. Let's see. So I got a chat message. Why isn't it showing up here? That David Binbergerly. Sorry if I really brutalized that name, David, but from Southwest Gas is here for the first time. Thank you very much for joining us, David. Fingerly. Ah, okay. Thank you, David. That's a little easier for me to pronounce. All right. So having no employment opportunities, at least that we're aware of, we'll move on. And I'm going to mute everybody again. All right. So everybody is muted. So if you are looking for a change, just remember there is a new careers page out on ASQ.org, as well as some other sites, both at headquarter level and in the section level. All right, and I think we've already covered this in the networking session, but just a reminder that there are a number of conferences that are coming up. The 2021 World Conference on Quality was originally scheduled to be in Anaheim, but because of COVID and the decision to make it a hybrid virtual, it's basically going to be held in Milwaukee again. And so the 2022 World Quality Conference will now be held in Anaheim. So it's not that far from our borders here in Arizona, so something you might be interested in attending. You might want to put this on your calendar for May 15th through the 18th of 2022. I made a little wet whistle. All right. Moving on, just a reminder, ASQ does offer certification exams, and they're all online. And many of them you can actually take from the comfort of your own home or office. So this is just a reminder. The deadline has already passed. That was September 6th, but these are all the certification exams. They'll be being offered in the month of October. And you can find this on the ASQ website as well. I want to thank everybody for continuing to participate in our monthly meetings. We do track attendance. We also track your satisfaction. It's very important to our operations. I want to make sure that we are delivering what you want to hear and that the presenters do a good job. And our historical average is just around 81%, which is a very good number. And of course, we're always looking to continuously improve. And these last 4 months have all been very, very high satisfaction levels. And again, I want to thank everybody for that. So please do complete the surveys at the end of the meeting. You will receive a thank you email, and in that email is a link to complete the survey. This survey is used both by us, and we give that feedback to the presenters as well. So they have an opportunity to improve their presentations. I've already covered this in the networking question, but again, the website's closing down soon. You want to make that change. We do have a drawing that goes on through the end of the year. Once a month, we choose all the people who joined during that month. We then do a random draw, and we select 3 individuals who win then a $10 gift certificate. They can either choose to accept that, or if you'd rather just donate it. We do have a donation accrual happening right now for St. Mary's Food Bank. So your choice. And Shruti Shyamani, who's our internet liaison, she is contacting all the winners and getting more information from them. If you do post a discussion topic, you have an opportunity to win a $25 gift certificate. For the month of August, we didn't have anyone initiate a new topic. Well, we had one of our member leaders, but they don't get to enjoy that benefit of the $25 gift certificate, so it goes back to the kitty. So we do encourage you to please collaborate, open up a discussion topic, and learn more about quality and improve your skills and competencies. Every month I report this very quickly. This is what we, the leadership team, are working on to improve our operations, to deliver more products and services. So we're making good progress. Everything started out red at the first of the year, not to be unexpected. And as we got our charters completed, we moved to yellow, and then as we're making progress on the activity toward the final goal, it turns green. Once we've met that target, where it's dark green, and then the X is we can consider that project completed and move on. So we're coming close to the third quarter, and we are rapidly closing most of our projects. We have a couple more that we could state are closed now. So making good progress. I want to thank all of the volunteers that we have on our executive committee for their hard work, time, and efforts. I think this will really make a meaningful impact to our members and to the effectiveness of our operations. We do have 3 openings on our executive conference that I am aware of so far for 2021. ASQ elections officially open this month, so if there are any what they call contested vacancies, where we have more than 1 volunteer, especially for an elected position, we could put out a ballot. Now, fortunately, for us, all of the elected positions are filled for next year, so we're good to go in that area. But we do have some appointed positions that are open. So if you are interested in volunteering, learning more about the operations of the section, getting a little bit more leadership experience under your belt, and just to meet a great group of fine people on your executive board, please feel free to raise your hand and volunteer to, or at least consider one of these positions. So the section secretary, we need someone who attends every meeting. There aren't that many. 1 board meeting a month. We have like 1 planning meeting a year. We have a mid-year just to see how we're doing. Do we need to adjust? And then the budget meeting. So maybe 1 meeting a month plus 3 other meetings scattered throughout the year. Take minutes, record the minutes, and then put them in our SharePoint site. That's kind of like our document control center. We are in need of a new newsletter editor. I want to thank Walter Teague for all of his contributions through the 17 years he's been our newsletter editor. It's going to be we're losing a lot of expertise, skills, and experience in that area. But my hat's off to Walter for sticking with us for that long of a time and giving us a very worthy newsletter, the Sundial, every month. So we are in need of a new newsletter editor. He is staying on to the end of the year, so this gives us a great opportunity to do some one-on-one coaching, so we have good onboarding and handoffs, so you can hit the ground running come January of next year. So if you have any interest, or maybe you have some unique skills, or you have some previous experience putting together a newsletter or a bulletin, we'd love to hear from you. And then finally, the on-site arrangements co-chair. We've had this vacancy for a while, but quite frankly, with virtual meetings, there really hasn't been a need for an on-site arrangements person. But once we do start having these face-to-face meetings again, we're going to need that position filled. And you can see here the responsibilities of that person. You work with the actual arrangements chair, and what Ulrich does, he sets up all the vendor contracts, he guarantees the facilities, works with the food vendor. The on-site person really handles, as we said, the on-site activities. So as members come in, checks them off, adds their name to the attendance sheet to make sure they get their RUs, purchases gift cards, monitors any virtual meetings for questions and that type of thing. So if you're going to be at the meeting anyhow, why not get some extra RU points for volunteering? So if you have an interest in any of those three, please send us an email. See our address at the bottom of the screen. All right, that's my 2 cents worth. We will now introduce our speaker for tonight. We have Timothy Woodcomb and Terry Sina from NQA, and they're going to be talking about the Department of Defense's Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification. As you see from the biography, Tim has worked in the third-party management systems field for quite a period of time. His expertise was first in ISO 9001, and then also in other standards, 22301, 27001, and other disciplines, which now includes cybersecurity. And he's been a lead auditor, and also serves on various industry groups charged with developing and overseeing international management quality standards. So tonight's presentation is just to give us a heads up of what's coming down the pike here. And if you want to do business with the Department of Defense, you're going to have to achieve third-party certification to this new CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model, or risk being deemed ineligible to be awarded DoD contracts. So as Tim says, this will be an overview presentation, give you a good first step to sort through fact versus fiction and what it means to your organization. Tim will review the basic requirements of the certification, the various levels involved, and an average timeline for the release. And Tim says there will be ample time allocated to questions and answers. So with that, Tim, are you, let's see if I can click on you and assign you control.
I'm here.
Stop sharing my presentation and turn control over to you as the presenter.
Okay.
Now you should have the series of buttons where you can share your presentation. There we go. Something's happening. Always a good sign. All right. So I can see a small image.
Oh, I may have shared the wrong screen then. Bear with me just a moment.
Okay. We see your calendar.
How's that?
There we go.
All right.
I think we've got it.
Okay, then I will take it away. Thank you, folks, for joining the meeting tonight, and thank you for having NQA here as your featured speakers. Both Terry and I certainly appreciate that. I'll be going through most of the details, but certainly Terry is kind of my partner in all this. Terry is the regional sales manager that many of you folks may have met through various meetings. And as mentioned, I'm kind of the director of some of the various business units at NQA, which for the purposes of this discussion, the Information Security and CMMC program will fall under. But as the bio kind of outlined, my lineage goes back to the ISO 9001 and ASQ and quality world. So really part of the objective of this presentation is to try to draw some connections between what might be or what might seem to be kind of a foreign, that being cybersecurity, with those folks coming from the quality angle. So we'll see how successful we are at that. Just to tell you a little bit about NQA, for those folks that aren't familiar with us, we are a global ISO certification body. We've been around since 1988. And of course, as you'd imagine, we do a whole bunch of ISO 9001 work. We are one of the largest AS providers as well, so AS being the aerospace derivative of ISO 9001. And then, of course, more and more so in the information security space, standards like ISO 27001. So it's just a very small subset of what we do as an example. We are based out of the U.S., so I'm actually out on the East Coast, which is where our home office is, and then Terry is out in California. Globally, we've got actually over 50,000 clients or certifications that we work with currently, and a big part of that back here domestically again is in the DoD. So that's partly again why we're positioned quite well for the CMMC, because we've got a lot of the DoD prime contractors. We actually have some ISO certifications within the DoD itself, and then of course a lot down through the supply chain. With regards to CMMC, we've actually been involved in this since probably just over a year ago now. So while the standard itself was only published in early January of this year, 2020, there were some early kind of startup meetings forming in the DC area back in the summer of 2019, and we were part of that, and we continue to be part of that. At this point, we are what's termed an applicant C3PAO, otherwise known as the certification body. C3PAO stands for Certified Third Party Assessing Organization. Different acronym for a different standard, but essentially the same thing.
So it has nothing to do with Star Wars?
Yeah, everyone goes right to that, yeah. I don't know. I think the person who came up with it must be a fan. At this point, there are no fully qualified applicants, so we've kind of taken it as far as we can go. One of the things I'll explain as we go along is that this is still forming, so we're kind of as far up the wave as we can go at the moment. We've also got about 12 assessors in application status as well, and similarly, that's kind of where that stands, although with the caveat that they just last week began a provisional training program for assessors, and we've actually got 3 folks that are going through that. So again, just kind of give you a quick glimpse of how we're positioned in this very, very early stages of this program. And that provisional program that the auditors are going through will then morph into several clients going through kind of provisional or trial audits, if you will, to kind of test and vet the whole program. And several of our clients are involved in that as well, for what that's worth. So as an overview, as mentioned, if you haven't heard about this yet and you work or want to work in the DoD space, you will hear about it. It is a mandate coming down from the DoD. It is focused on what you would generally call cybersecurity, but a lot of these are practices and policies that, not purely information security per se. It does have with it a 5-level maturity model that I'll explain a bit in terms of how that plays out, both in terms of what level you as an organization might be targeting, and then what that means within your deployment. Numbers that are being thrown around are anywhere from 300,000 to 350,000 contractors throughout the defense industrial base, and that would be at all levels, of course, prime contractors on down through the entire supply chain. And you'll find that this program is rife with new acronyms. So you folks out there that are looking to be certified as organizations, you'll be known as OSCs, Organizations Seeking Certification, and I'll probably use that acronym a bit as we go along here. It is going to be a phased rollout. From the get-go, they were talking about 2020 through 2025. I'll explain that 2020 has moved on more or less unabated, but a little bit slowed down as of late at least. So while that is still the party line, so to speak, that it's going to go through 2025, I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see if that gets expanded into 2026 perhaps, but suffice to say, I think the takeaway is it's roughly a 5-year rollout. It's not going to be overnight, but you're not going to have forever either. And it is going to be an accredited program. Folks in the ISO world are familiar with accreditation, I'm sure. Typically, we'd be speaking about someone like ANAB, the kind of the primary ISO accreditation body in the U.S., or someone like UCAS coming out of the UK. But this is a completely new and completely different accreditation body, otherwise known as the CMMC AB, or the CMMC accreditation body. And they'll be the ones whom actually all various players in this go through, whether it's the C3PAOs, the assessors, trainers, even consulting firms will go through the CMMC AB at some level to get vetted. So these are just a couple of quick quotes, and you can kind of see where I got it from the sourcing in the bottom there. Just to kind of give some high-level objectives of the program and what the DoD is looking to do. So in essence, it is kind of a standard of standards. CMMC is made up of various pre-existing cybersecurity standards and best practices, or controls and practices within those. And it's basically borrowed from them and kind of mapped them to those various maturity levels. And as you can imagine, those maturity levels range from the very basics of what any organization should be doing to the most advanced, which of course would be kind of focused at organizations dealing with very confidential or top secret type information. It does build on the existing DFARS 252, 204, 7012. So if that means anything to you, then CMMC will certainly mean something to you. For those that aren't familiar with that DFARS, that DFAR called out organizations that hold confidential, unclassified information to be self-compliant to a standard called NIST 800-171. The short story of it is the government quickly realized that self-attestation or self-certification is only really as good as the person doing that and the organization doing it. So a quick way to think about CMMC is that it's the evolution of that from self-attestation to third-party certification. They have stated that one of the goals of CMMC is to make this cost-effective and affordable for small businesses at the lower levels. And that, I think, is really pointing at level 1 in particular. And I'll try to explain a little bit about what that means. It's hard to look into the crystal ball and say exactly who's going to need to be level 1 versus who's going to need to be level 3 or level 5, but we'll give you some ideas. And then lastly, kind of as alluded to, it is going to be a third-party audit process. So again, similar to ISO, where you have an independent organization, independent auditor come in. So I actually kind of want to start off with just some very quick down and dirty facts about this. The first thing that is pointing out, and it is a bit of a moving target, CMMC is going to start showing up in new RFPs. Initially, this was said to be late 2020. As I said, this is getting slowed down a little bit, so I've added kind of in there the 2020/2021 timeframe. So whether it's Q4 of this year or Q1 of next year, suffice to say, within the coming months, this will start to show up in some new RFPs. So it will not affect any existing contract you have per se, and it certainly, again, won't show up in every new RFP starting in that time frame, but really in a phased approach. And one of the key things that's waiting for there as well is the DFARS needs a rule change, because again, right now it currently calls out the self-attestation to NIST 800-171. That will need to be changed to the CMMC program before this effectively can start. But once it does start, the RFP or the contract itself will very clearly specify the CMMC maturity level, or ML, as you'll see referenced. So that will make it clear as to you what level at least the prime needs to be certified for. And then how that is flowed down, we'll talk about in just a moment, but suffice to say it will be flowed down either at that level or at a lower level. The initial ramp-up is going to be managed a bit by the CMMCAB, so that's where I talked a little bit about the provisional programs going on now with regards to both the assessors and some of the first organizations going through some of the kind of the test audits, if you will. Organizations will need to have that certification prior to getting the contract awarded. So you may be able to bid on contracts without having CMMC certification in hand, but prior to that being awarded, you will need to get the certification. And I think the caveat there is, at least initially, there's going to be a resource crunch. So you can't expect to just call up a C3PAO and have an audit next week or even in the next month. You may have to contact several C3POs, and the best availability may be several months. So bear that in mind as you think about this. If you do need to pursue this or want to pursue this, build in some time into your plan. I mentioned it'll apply to both subs and primes. The quote there is that straight from the CMMC folks, that it will apply to all DoD suppliers. Now, the key point in this last bullet is, as I said, the subcontractors may be at a lower maturity level. So let's say the contract comes out at a level 3. Some folks will certainly need to be at level 3, but other organizations probably lower in the supply chain, or the key factor here is depending on whether or not they have access to that confidential unclassified information, or that CUI. If they do have that information, then you can pretty much target level 3 or perhaps even above. If you do not have that information, then it's going to be a pretty safe bet that you can target something like a level 1. No guarantees, but that's kind of the early cliff notes on that. Mentioned that it's a accredited program, so as you can imagine, the auditor themselves must be licensed, and that will be again all flowing through the CMMCAB. So they're going to be kind of the gatekeeper for all of this. So the assessors will need to go through licensed training providers who again are qualified by the CMMCAB. They'll actually take their test straight through the CMMCAB, so the testing will be a little bit different. It won't be provided by the training provider. It'll be provided straight through CMMC. And then the qualifications similarly will be granted by the CMMCAB. Again, certification only through those third-party C3PO firms. And this bit is unique there, the third bullet, is that in order to be successfully certified for a given level, the organization will have to meet all the requirements. So liken that to an ISO audit, I think you can kind of say that no non-conformances, or at least no major non-conformances, would be akin to what's being expected. For any organizations that are familiar with the self-attestation and the NIST 800-171 program, there's something called a POAM, or a POA&M, Plan of Action and Milestones. That basically is going to go away, so you must meet all the requirements with no POAMs in order to be successfully certified to a given level. As of now, they're saying the certification will be valid for 3 years. As of now, they're saying that's without any additional audit per se, although I do hear people waffling on that a little bit. There might be some kind of continuous monitoring going on. There might be additional audits called for depending on either changes to the organization or issues that the organization has. So really no guarantees on that just yet, but at the moment, it looks like it's a kind of one and done for 3 years. To be honest, I guess this is my editorial. That would be a bit surprising, especially in this space, in the cybersecurity world, where things move and change so quickly. To have a certification be valid sight unseen for 3 years, I don't know if that will be the end result, but that's what they're saying at the moment. The other thing that's interesting to note is that the cost of certifications, cost of CMMC certification, is going to be considered an allowable cost. And that's kind of government contracting lingo for you can build it into what you're bidding or what you're charging the government for that. Now, there's pros and cons of that, and I think that in and of itself it could be the makings of an entirely separate webinar. So I'm not going to get into the detail of it. I'm not an expert on it, for one. But if you are familiar with that, think about that. If you're not familiar with that allowable cost concept, you might want to find someone who is and see what that means, because while certainly one of the objectives was to make this cost effective, particularly for small organizations, again, I think the focus there is for the small organizations at level 1. If you're a larger organization or looking for level 3 or above, it's probably not going to be necessarily cheap. It will probably be at least on par with an ISO certification, if not north of that, perhaps to the realm of like a CMMI certification cost. So those are a lot of things that have yet to be determined, and whether or not the CMMCAB is going to come out with information on that, or whether the market's just going to coalesce. The writing on the wall is that there will be low-cost certifications for the smallest of organizations at level 1, but rigorous audits at level 3 probably going to be more expensive than ISO. Timeline-wise, in terms of where this is at, the red dashed line kind of giving an indication of roughly where we're at. This is what they originally put out. This would have been kind of early this year. So the standard itself you kind of saw being released in January. The AB itself was officially formed in February, and they were planning to kind of go through a kind of a sequential path of auditor training, C3PO accreditation, get those first RFPs out, and then kind of get it into gear late 2020 and through 2021. The reality of it has kind of shifted, like I said, a lot of those things back. Partly due to COVID, partly due just to them realizing what they're trying to build here is maybe more than they initially thought. But it does progress relatively unabated. So I mentioned that the provisional auditor training has occurred. There's actually 2 groupings, 2 cohorts going through that. One, like I say, just finished a week or 2 ago. Another one is going on in a week or so. And that only makes up about 60 to 70 individuals. So that's, like I say, very provisional, very early stages. There's roughly about 500 people that have applied to be assessors at this point. So you kind of see the tip of the iceberg there. I would see the C3PO accreditation following suit. So once they get the auditor program up and running, I think they'll refocus themselves on the C3PO accreditation. So I'm saying late 2020. Q4 basically for the first accreditations. And then RFPs themselves, I'm a little bit suspect as to whether or not any will show up in 2020 proper, but certainly early 2021. So again, whether you want to call it late 2020, early 2021, kind of potato, it's going to be around the winter time of the winter that we'll see that. So you'll see the first wave of registrants, and then kind of the full first year of CMMC work, kind of the open market, if you will, 2021 and onwards, again through the moment, or for the moment, through 2025. The standard, and I got that in quotes, the standard itself is unique. First of all, it's not a management system standard. So again, coming from the ISO arena, it's going to look and feel very different. It's really focused strictly on a set of what I would have called controls. So if folks are familiar with ISO 27001, it's more akin to the Annex A controls in 27001. CMMC technically is calling them practices, but they read kind of similarly, but I think it's fair to call them requirements too, because they read like requirements. They're very succinct, they're very focused, and there's depending on which level you're at, anywhere from about 17 to close to 200. That said, though, there are many ISO type processes or practices that are applicable. So there are documents that are required, there's policies that are required, there's training that's required. A big part of it is focused on risk assessment. Certainly we have some knowledge in that these days. And then there's that internal aspect of auditing and assessing their own programs and their own effectiveness. So those are some areas that certainly overlap with, I think, a lot of the folks on the call here today. The main objectives, as I'm kind of alluded to before, is to really protect two types of information. I'm going to jump down to the second bullet, that controlled unclassified information, the CUI or QE as some people call it. That's really the critical thing, and that's really what the focus again at level 3 is on. So level 3 is kind of the make or break point, if you will, of the 5 levels. Level 3, rightfully so, is kind of the pivot point. If you've got controlled unclassified information, you should be thinking about level 3. If you have more than that, you're kind of at level 4, level 5. But if you are not getting the CUI, but you have, by definition, some federal contract information or FCI, that technically is regulated by one of the FAR regulations now. Much less specific about whatever product or project you might be contributing to, but still some information about federal contracts. If the information you have is at that level, then you're really at level 1. So the key thing to think about, or to figure out, I guess, if your organization is in this space, is what types of information do you get? And again, different webinar for a different day, but all this information should be labeled. So that's one of the things about government information for one, and kind of this information security space that is one of the key requirements, is that the information should be labeled as to what category it falls in. So based on what kind of work you're doing now, you should have a general feel of whether you've only got FCI or whether you've got CUI. Similar to ISO, organizations can scope either the entire organization or parts thereof for this CMMC certification. Another key thing to note is that once you achieve CMMC certification, it is good for whatever other contracts come out for that same level, assuming that the scope is equivalent as well. So that, I guess, is the risk of scoping down too much. If you scope down to just a given project or a given enclave to meet a certain contract, that work, that certification may or may not be valid for future contracts. Conversely, if you scope the entire organization and get certified, say to level 3 for the entire organization, then your entire organization is good to go to bid on any future level 3 type contracts. So bear that in mind as you're thinking about it as well. And then one of the interesting things, I think again one of the secrets in this, is that the, again, quote unquote standard really is made up of 2 documents. Neither, of course, is called a standard per se. The first one is the CMMC model, currently at version 1.02. That is what I would call the standard. That's where the controls are spelled out, and they're spelled out kind of categorized by areas or domains, and then numbered sequentially. So it'll make sense. It doesn't look like an ISO numbering, but it'll make sense because it is sequential. So that is the quote unquote standard, very short and sweet on the requirements or on the practices. But then when used in conjunction with the CMMC model appendices, also at version 1.02, that's like your ISO 9004. So if you think of the CMMC model as your ISO 9001, the 9004 document, that kind of gives you a lot more detail, a lot more insight and kind of guidance, if you will. That appendix document it's almost 200 pages long, whereas the standard itself is, maybe 25 pages long. So within the appendices, number one, you've got the requirement restated, kind of like 9004 had, but it gives also guidance from whatever source document it came from. A lot of these come from NIST 800-171. So it gives the guidance from that document, and then it often will give additional CMMC interpretations and even examples of how an organization might implement or achieve that. So if you take nothing else away from this presentation and you're going down the CMMC path, take away the fact that you should most definitely download not just the standard, the model, but also the appendices. I think the appendices is a critical document for this. Just a quick lineage, I already kind of alluded to this, but a lot of the requirements come out of that NIST 800-171. The way this chart is kind of made up, you see the levels, the maturity levels going down in the first column over there, and then some of the key source documents that comes from. So again, this kind of proves the point that if you're beholden to that DFARS and you're NIST 800-171 compliant, then that kind of maps to level 3. In terms of how it builds up, mentioned level 1 is really meant for those organizations with no confidential unclassified information, pretty benign or agnostic information that they're getting at that level. So think obviously a couple levels down in the supply chain, or people not really critical to a given project or product. Bear in mind, again, this is all DoD contractors, so this is including people that really have nothing to do directly, if you will, with a given product or project. So a lot of those folks will fall in here, and then people, at the kind of generic component level perhaps might also fall in here. That's where it'll get a little bit gray. But those organizations, that's where the cost-effective short audit's going to be, because the number of practices or requirements, if you will, only are 17 at that level. It builds up from there. Level 2 adds a pretty good chunk of 55, and then level 3 another 58. I think if my math is right, that comes out to about 130 controls through that. And that is again, kind of the target level, the target next level. What they're saying is that level 2 is probably not going to show up on many, if any, contracts. It's going to be more kind of a milestone or a stopping point between an organization trying to get from level 1 to level 3. Just kind of breaks it off. You can kind of see they've broken it almost in half and kind of given you a way to eat the elephant, so to speak. But level 3 would really be the next targeted certification level, and then beyond that, level 4 adds another 26, and level 5 another 15. As you can imagine, not only do the controls increase, but they get a little more complex as you go on, especially levels 4 and levels 5. This is just another way to look at it. Again, this comes straight from some of the CMMC information. You can see the source down below, mapping out the number of practices, what they're calling, kind of the descriptors of the levels from basic cyber hygiene to advanced or progressive, and just a little bit of information where the controls come from. Key thing I wanted to get to, though, was in addition to just those sheer numbers of controls that is driven by the maturity level that you would be at, the assessors are also going to be looking for the process maturity. And this is, I guess you think of the maturity level within this standard twofold. One, again, driving which controls or how many controls, but then also the way in which those controls are managed, I'll say. So at a maturity level 1, you're just doing it. It's very ad hoc. It's getting done. You may be lucky that it's getting done, frankly. That's maturity level 1. So obviously they're not asking for a lot. At level 2, we start to come into a little bit of our own in the ISO world, where at least you've got the process documented. And then at level 3, I think more of what we would expect from an ISO system. Not only is it documented, but it's being actively managed. I might argue that level 4 is really kind of akin to ISO, where it's then being reviewed, so you kind of get your plan, do, check, act model almost built into that. And then at level 5, really again going to be kind of the cream of the crop, where these processes are optimized. They're very, very proactive. They're on top of anything. It's really looking for advanced persistent threats and being able to fend anything and everything off. So I think the focus again would be kind of back to that level 3. Don't get over ambitious. Most organizations will need to worry about implementing the controls, documenting them, and managing them. Not too much to ask from the maturity level perspective. In terms of the practices themselves, mention that they're broken into categories or domains, as CMMC will call it, and there's 17 domains. You can read them off on the screen there. I'm not going to read through them all, but think of these as kind of just areas or buckets where various controls exist. Not all these domains have the same number of controls. Not all of these domains have controls at every level. Some of these domains don't come in to play until level 2 or level 3. Some of them not all the level 1 practices are evenly distributed across these 17 domains. So again, looking at the standard, that would give you a little more insight into how it falls out. But I guess you could kind of think of this again, in the ISO world, think of it as your various requirement statements. Not quite the same, but similar in that respect. And as far as connectivity to ISO folks or quality personnel, highlighted a couple areas. This is not all-inclusive, but certainly awareness and training. The requirements in that, while it's focused on people being aware of cybersecurity policies and being trained on cybersecurity policies and such, at the end of the day, it's awareness and training, something straight out of ISO. Personnel security, not straight out of ISO per se, but again, it's very non-technical set of controls, something that a QMS person could easily help write policies or procedures for, and or even audit or assess. Similarly with physical protection. Risk management, again, very much a hot topic for us over the past, 5 years now since the latest and greatest 9001 standard. So risk management, I think, is something that everyone on the call should be well versed with, as will folks in the IT space probably be fairly well versed on this. Again, depending on the size of your organization, you may even have kind of a GRC, Global Risk and Compliance type group. Smaller organizations, of course, won't, but that's, again, maybe where you might come in more to play to help facilitate a risk management discussion. Now, again, the risks here are going to be focused on information security, cybersecurity type things, but at the end of the day, the processes are going to be something that you are familiar with. So I think there's a potential role for folks like us there. And then similarly on security assessment, kind of like the personnel and physical protection, nothing too IT or techie there. So those are some places that I think there might be a good entree for QMS folks to get into this. Not to say that you can't get into some of the other areas that aren't highlighted, but I think those might be the 5 or so starting points. And then once you get more familiar with the cybersecurity lingo and controls and the team for that matter, then you could certainly get into some of those other more technical areas. Not expecting folks to become cybersecurity experts or analysts or coders, but a lot of those other areas that aren't highlighted also have kind of relatively agnostic policy or training or awareness practice type requirements that you could follow along with. So in terms of what I would suggest as takeaways from just that brief overview of how the standards laid out, I think in many organizations, a lot of those practices will already be in place, especially those 17 at the maturity level 1. Very simply, it's stuff like having usernames and passwords. So if you don't have that, then you're maybe in some trouble. But I would think most organizations already have some of those practices like that at the maturity level 1 at least in place. Probably some of those requirements might need a little bit of tweaking because you may have it in place for whatever suited your needs or your expectations, but the standard might have some slightly different expectations or details on it. So some of those practices might require some tweaking. And a lot, obviously, will require some input from the IT group, IT or information security. If you've got a separate information security or cybersecurity group, I guess more appropriately. The best case scenario in my mind would be seeing management system personnel and IT or InfoSec personnel come together to implement a CMMC program for an organization, because I do think there are disciplines from both angles that would come together to kind of serve the best practice model of implementation. So as you bring this back to your organization, I would certainly use that as a potential roadmap. Don't just say, okay, here, IT, here's what I learned, but see what kind of a role you can take in forming that and helping it come to fruition. And that kind of goes to the fourth point. A good number of these requirements can be reviewed or supported by ISO folks. And the CMMC, for what it's worth, CMMC-AB, on their website advises a 6-month implementation preparation period. Now, I would put a big asterisk on that. It really depends, of course, what level you're shooting for, where your starting point is, of course, what kind of resources you're throwing at it. All sorts of things really play into that. 6 months, not a bad rule of thumb, especially if you're thinking level 3 and, let's say you're at, a low to moderate level of implementation. That's probably not a bad target. If you need to be level 1, 6 months might be a little bit generous. Certainly if you need to be above level 3, 6 months might not be enough. And I think, again, the key takeaway on this is your internal implementation preparation. Once you're ready to be certified, it will really be kind of a question of what C3PAOs are out there, what's the assessor availability. I don't think I would build that into the 6-month preparation necessarily unless you're starting those conversations with a C3PAO early on. Again, don't expect to go 5 months and be implemented and then expect the audit to take place necessarily within the next 3 to 4 weeks. That probably won't happen. So 6 months internally, and then it's really hard to tell at this point, but as far as, kind of getting in the queue for certification, I would say, longer than ISO, longer than AS. So, you might be talking at least 2 to 3 months, maybe 2 to 4 months, maybe longer, especially at the first, if you're looking to be part of the first early wave. Resources are frankly what's keeping me up at night. That's going to be the major constraint. Already mentioned that the practices get more complex as the level increases. I think that's suffice to say. Harped on the fact again that the DFARS kind of maps to level 3. Otherwise, you might be just level 1. So again, try to figure out what you need to shoot for before you aim too high or too low. And then also take into consideration again that process maturity aspect that I briefly went over along with the given controls. So it's not just getting the controls in place and kind of hoping for the best, especially at level 3, but getting those controls in place, making sure it's bedded down within the organization, making sure the practices are not only documented, but being well managed as well if you're at level 3. All right, so how's all this going to play out? Well, no one really knows quite yet, but the general consensus is that level 1 is going to be by and far the largest. It's going to also be where most of the smallest organizations wind up going. And again, as I mentioned, the key factor is what type of information do you have? Do you have CUI or not? If not, then you can shoot for level 1. Level 2, as I mentioned, kind of a bridge status. And then the next really main focus is level 3, which would be mapped to the DFARS and CUI being the key indicator there. If you have CUI, then level 3 would be a good guess. General consensus is level 4 and above, going to be kind of in the single-digit percentages. Less than 1% is generally the number I've thrown around, and again, bear that in mind. That's less than 1% of 300,000, so it's still a good number of organizations, but it may not be many folks on the call here tonight, for example. So in terms of how this whole thing looks, well, we've obviously talked about the CMMC AB, and they're kind of the starting point. They're working on licensing training providers, so the training providers might be different than what you're accustomed to in the ISO world. If nothing else, again, they're going to need to be qualified or vetted. I'm not sure if they're calling it accredited or certified, but they'll need to be, I guess, licensed training providers by the CMMC AB. So you want to make sure that they are of that approval status before you go get CMMC training from someone that's not. Similarly with the certified assessors, our assessors are going to go through the licensed training providers to get their training. Those LTPs probably will have a variety of courses, some geared to assessors, some geared to consultants, frankly, some geared to organizations. So that will be similar, but just make sure that they're qualified. Certified assessors, as you can imagine, will work with or work for the C3PAOs or certification bodies like NQA, who in turn will go into their organizations or organizations seeking certification, the OSCs. So that whole ecosystem kind of makes sense, probably is similar to what we deal with in the ISO world, with the exception that it's a little bit more managed or centrally controlled, in this case by the CMMC AB. Beyond just the certification process, though, as you can imagine, there's going to be a lot of support people out there, consultants and the like. They've also got their own new acronyms to think about. So an individual consultant, if you will, is going to be known as a registered practitioner, or RP, and a consulting organization is going to be known as an RPO, or a registered provider organization. So obviously RPs will work for RPOs. So if you're looking for a quote-unquote consultant, that would be really what you're looking for. A lot of these folks, and really I think all these folks, once they're qualified, once they're vetted by the CMMC AB, there will be an official CMMC marketplace, so website, think, or database. So these folks should also be listed in there. So that's really going to be the fail-safe, is that if you're looking for an RPO or a training provider, going to that marketplace will get you to the right people you want. Otherwise, it's a bit of a buyer beware. So those are a little bit outside of the certification process. Consider those optional. Obviously, you don't need to use those support personnel, but I know a lot of organizations might want to. So an organization itself, you might be working with a licensed training provider to get some training. You might be working with, quote-unquote consultants, or even other organizations. There's going to be managed security service providers, or MSSPs, that are getting into this. We've already seen software providers getting into this to come up with various tools to map and track the practices. Not necessary as part of the certification process per se, but again, there's some of the tools or some of the organizations out there that would be happy to help if you so need it. All right, so getting over to the audit side, and of course this is what NQA will be doing, and we're doing our due diligence, talking to a lot of the CMMC AB folks as much as we can. There's a distinct prohibition on someone like us being part of the CMMC AB due to conflict of interest. So obviously we're not part of the AB, but we've been networking with those folks as much as we can. So some of this is kind of publicly available information. Some of this is what we're starting to read between the lines. But the fact of the matter is we don't really exactly know yet. But we know that we think that the audit durations will certainly vary, and especially by the maturity level. So again, think level 1 audits being shorter than a level 3 audit. And the general thinking from our side at least is that, level 1 audits will be in the realm of days, a day maybe for the smallest organizations, a couple days for larger organizations at level 1. But when you're getting up into level 3 or level 4 and beyond, those audits might frankly, morph into weeks. And it might be that you could have, a team of auditors conduct a quote-unquote 10, person day audit within a week, but suffice to say that the audit days, the audit duration might go beyond a 5-day work week. We know, of course, that there are going to be audits conducted by these third-party C3PAOs. The intent is for them to be on-site. Of course, the big asterisk right now is that going to be the case? And at least initially, they are going to allow some off-sites. I think that's what part of the provisional program is going to try to vet out. I wouldn't bank on the CMMC adopting a remote option long-term, but you may see some remote audits initially. Like an ISO audit, though, or like really any kind of audit, it's going to be evidence-based, so it's not just showing a policy and having the auditor check the box. There's going to have to be evidence there behind that to show that the policy is being followed and some samples or testing of that to prove it out. Unlike ISO, there's no provisions for a stage 1, so it's basically you just go to the main event, just go to the audit. And as I've alluded to earlier, at the moment at least, no provisions for surveillances. So that 3-year valid certification, you can almost think of it as you get your initial certification, and then 3 years later, potentially you get your recertification, if that holds true. There are gap assessments that are available and optional. So again, similar to the ISO world, you can do gap assessments. Organizations like NQA right now are doing gap assessments because we know what the requirements are. The requirements have been out there really, frankly, for a long time. So we are starting to assess organizations to those requirements strictly as a gap activity for their preparation. Talking about the kind of needing to have a clean slate to be certified, no open findings, if you will. That said, there is going to be a quote-unquote corrective action process. Currently, what they're stating is up to 90 days. So if you have findings coming out of your audit, you can assume for the moment at least that you'll have a corrective action period of 90 days to really correct that, though. So again, the difference here a little bit is that probably think more like a major nonconformance. Not only do you need to have the corrective action plan, but you also need to implement and make sure that's effective and have evidence to show the assessor to clear that finding out. So any and all findings need to be resolved within those 90 days. They haven't been explicit on how that's going to be done, but I think it's safe to say that it would involve some type of a reassessment for those particular findings, whether that's remote or off-site or on-site. I think that's a little bit TBD and a little bit up in the air depending on the conditions, but I think the big takeaway again is to make sure that any findings would need to be fully resolved and closed prior to getting certification. And that, of course, kind of expounds on the second to last bullet there, that all the practices must be met along with the process maturity for the given level being achieved. And one unique thing, kind of more anecdotally here, is while the C3PAO will be conducting the audit, writing an audit report, clearing those findings for that matter, the CMMC AB will actually be reviewing those audits, and ultimately they will be issuing the certification. So again, kind of keeping their finger on the pulse of what's going on, and also taking a little bit of separation from the C3PAOs. So interesting to see how that'll play out. A little bit different in the ISO world, but at the moment, just kind of anecdotal. All right, so kind of wrapping it up, and a quick change of pace before we get there. Famous quote that a lot of people probably will recognize goes something like this, because as we know, there are known knowns, there are things we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know. And of course, that's kind of a fun little quote from former U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. I think it's appropriate here, not only coming from the Defense Secretary, but when you map it to CMMC, there are still a fair number of known unknowns. We don't exactly know when the full training is going to be available, probably sometime in early 2021. That's becoming a little bit clearer. We don't know when the C3POs will be accredited. Again, I'm guessing kind of late this year, but I couldn't tell you exactly when. And most certainly for the folks interested in this on your side, I cannot tell you which contracts are going to start calling out CMMC, nor when those are going to start coming. But again, we know that they are going to start trickling in, if not late this year, at least early next year. How the flow down works, what the audit durations are going to look like, what the reporting and certification timelines and look and feel are, those still fall into the unknowns at this point. But there are a lot of knowns, so let's kind of finish up with that. As I mentioned, the development here continues relatively unslowed, so I don't think we're going to see this drag out too long beyond what the original plan was. DoD remains fully behind it, and actually beyond that, other agencies are already taking notice. A quick interesting tidbit here is that CMMC has been referenced already in at least 2 contracts. And I say referenced because it was not called out as a requirement, but rather the agencies in question kind of mentioned CMMC and tagged it as they reserve the right to invoke it later or check their supplier's compliance with it. And I think the most interesting part of that was that these contracts that were the first to reference CMMC, which is ostensibly the DoD's cybersecurity program, they were not DoD contracts. They were GSA contracts, just kind of government administration contracts. So the writing on the wall is there, is that while DoD may be blazing the trail on this, other agencies are well aware of it and ready to ride on the coattails. So whether you work in DoD or whether you work in other government agencies, it may be equally applicable to you. We also know that primes are very in tune to this, and they've begun really probably over the past year at this point, flowing it down or at least making their supply chain aware of it. As we said, most will fall into level 3 or level 1 suppliers, but both require that third-party audit and certification. So as an example of that, this is just one that we've seen. This was early this year, actually, from a prime contractor to its suppliers, basically, paraphrasing, saying that, we are aware of this, and we know that you help us support that DoD contract. You therefore need to become familiar with CMMC. At that time, of course, they were quoting the late 2020 rollout, and basically saying, the primes understand that their success is linked intrinsically with their supplier's success on this. So they've been getting the word out early and often. If you're one of these suppliers, I wouldn't be surprised that you have one, if not several of these communications from your contractors in terms of getting you aware and trying to get you ready for it. And then just a couple last kind of knowns on this. Again, we already know what the requirements are, so the standard's out there. Frankly, a lot of the requirements of the standard were in NIST 800-171 prior to this, so organizations like NQA have been doing gap assessments or doing attestations to NIST 800-171 for a while now, and we continue to morph that into CMMC gap assessments, so you can start to get ready in that respect. And many proactive organizations are starting to get ready, whether it's themselves or using additional services. So that's kind of the takeaway. Just really links here for your quick finding of these documents that I referenced, the one being the quote-unquote standard or the model, and then the second being that guidance or the 9004 type document. And then, of course, just a little bit of information coming from the MQA side in terms of our landing page on CMMC. And then finally, Terry Sen is our regional sales manager, based out of California, but covering the Phoenix and all of Arizona territory for that matter. So she can be reached by that email. And then my contact information, again, I'm probably coming at it a little bit more from the technical side and the overall program side, but happy to address any questions that folks might have. And there's my contact information. And that is the end of the slideshow I've got. So we did, I guess, leave a little bit of time for questions, but I'll turn it back over to our moderator.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. Excellent job. I have a much better understanding of what the DoD CMC is all about. Does anybody out there in the virtual space have any questions? You can either raise your hand or choose to unmute yourself. Wait for a few seconds. And nobody steps forward. I'll unmute everybody just in case there's a problem on your end. So let me go ahead and unmute everybody. All right, everybody is now unmuted. Does anybody have a question for No, don't hear anything. Up here.
Well, have a good evening, and I will holler at you tomorrow,
All right.
okay?
Well, I will mute everybody again.
All right, good night.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate your presentation. And again, the handout is available on our website if anybody has or would like to reference it. Plus, this presentation has been recorded, so if you'd like to maybe have someone else in your organization listen to the presentation, you can request that we send a link. So if you can have that person send a note to our ASQ 0704 contact us at gmail.com, we can then send them a link to the recorded presentation. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Tim. I take over the role of presenter.
All right, my pleasure.
Okay. Let's see, share screen. So just with a final wrap up, again, then I want to give our thanks to Tim from NQA, given a very thorough introduction to CMC. And if you have any questions, he also provided his contact information there, as well as that for Terry Sina, who is the regional manager for NQA. Just a few final closing comments. Following this meeting, you will be receiving an email from our Voice of Customer Chair, John Lindland. And in that email, he will include a copy of your certificate and also a link to take our online survey. And we do ask that you please do complete that survey. It helps us in our future planning. Next month, October 8th, we have one of our own. For those of you who have been around the section for a few years, you may recall the name of Stephanie Thompson. She was a member of our committee team a couple years back. She was our student chapter liaison working with ASU. She is now in, I believe, in California, working with divisions. And she'll give you a presentation next month on improving the value of your membership experience through participation in some of these ASQ technical committees, whether they're divisions, forums, interest groups, whatever. And that will be October 8th, same place, same time. Just looking out for the remainder of the year, Vic Nanda, our program chair, has done an excellent job throughout the year. I want to give him a hands, a round of claps for an excellent schedule of speakers for this year. In November, we have Grace Duffy lined. Again, those of you who have been around ASQ for a few years may recall the name Grace Duffy. She's been a very active member of ASQ. She's in fact served on the ASQ board. She was chair of the division, the Quality Management Division, for a couple of years. She will be the guest speaker in November introducing BEST, B-E-S-T, which is a methodology, and there's actually a book and a website that she will provide more information about how to recognize best practices. So very, very worthy talk. And again, a reminder, November is World Quality Month. Hopefully we will have some more information for you, how you and your organization can participate with some tools, tips, games, downloads from ASQ. And then closing out the year, December 10th, another one of our own, Rachel Shagat, who is our current student chapter liaison, with a background in a variety of industries and manufacturers, will be giving a presentation on Six Sigma for Dummies. And keeping with the theme of the time, she is rebranding her talk and going to gear it more towards toying with Six Sigma. So like Six Sigma at the North Pole or something like that. So it should be a very entertaining as well as informative talk. I did mention we have one more survey question. So if you have your cell phone open and you're still logged into our activity, the final question is just a very mini survey. Still want you to do the other survey, more detailed, maybe 5 or 6 questions. This one, just one question, just curious, how would you rate tonight's program? On a scale from very satisfied to very dissatisfied. Again, just go to your cell phone, enter your results, and just let us know how you're doing. And feedback, looks like we have a pretty satisfied group of attendees. So again, Tim and Terry, thank you very much. And with that, I will close up the meeting and wish you all a very happy remainder of September. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay connected. And we'll see you next month. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Bye-bye.